Stephen interviews you. Hey guys, welcome to a very special edition of Stephen Interviews You. Uh, Obviously, I'm not interviewing anybody right now, but this is a special thing where it's been in the months. It's been, a work in progress for months now, from an idea to executing this. Um, Yeah, so 2025 has been an amazing year for me as far as getting interviews with other people. And as you guys can tell, as you guys will tell from watching this compilation of videos that I pieced together, I've had quite a bit of fun doing this, having all these interviews with other different people, and just sitting back and listening to what they have to say. Um, it's really about the other person that I'm interviewing. It's not about me. It's just having that opportunity to sit down and listen to someone else tell their story from their perspective in situations that are of interest to them and discussing topics that matter to them. As I always put out there in the graphic, discussing topics that matter to you. That's definitely at the heart of this. So, the people you are about to listen to after I get off here. The people you're about to listen to in this compilation, I'm just going to run through all these names here. And I really hope that you guys listening take out the time to really appreciate what these other people have to say. Uh, they're very talented in their own right. Um, they do amazing stuff on YouTube. And for what they do, they are really inspiring for the content they put out there. And I really hope that you guys just take out the time to listen to them and to just really appreciate what is being said. So, going through the list here, it would be John Kurtz. I just like how he presents himself, the stories that he tells, and the explanations behind them. I've known John for a long time, listened to his channel for a long time. He renamed it recently to In Business, uh, Open for Business. That's what the new name of the channel is. But back then it was just John Kurtz. So yeah, John, always fun to listen to. And another John, Jon Johnston, uh, definitely a passionate, diehard Nebraska Cornhuskers fan. But he also has another channel that's dedicated to football history, college football history, which is really good and informative. Jon Johnston, informative and educational, but he's also fiery and passionate, as you guys will also tell. Always fun to listen to again, Jon Johnston. Forrest Poston. Um, the only interview this year that did not talk about college football, college sports stuff was Forrest Poston. But that's okay. We agreed to talking about different things there. But he does cover the West Virginia Mountaineers for college football, just so you guys know. Highly intelligent, sharp guy. Forrest is very knowledgeable about so many different topics. And he's just, again, wonderful to listen to. I mean, good stuff from Forrest. Larry Krayn, aka Larry K, he keeps it cool and casual. He breaks stuff down in such a way that you can just get into, just sit back, listen to. It's like, yeah, I want to listen to this guy. So yeah, Larry Krayn, always fun to sit down, have a chat with him. Justin Walker, aka Coos Corner, he was a very integral in very integral and crucial in my inspiration, inspired me to start Bobcat Corner, another series I run. But also just listening to Justin Walker, Coos, he tells it like it is, and I appreciate that. He keeps it real, and he tells you what you need to hear. That's what I really appreciate about Coos. Connor Webb, the Couch GM, very straightforward with the answers that he gives you. He's fun to listen to. Uh, just a very welcoming atmosphere when you listen to his videos over there on the Couch GM. Jay Ballard and Jeff Lowe, uh, Virginia, Virginia Cavaliers fans. Those guys, the friendly guys, guys that you can go out to a restaurant and chat with. Yeah, they're just really fun guys to listen to. Cavalier Connection podcast. Nathaniel Bope, aka Tailgate Nate. You can feel the passion. You can feel the enthusiasm and the passion when you listen to him. He's all about college football, college sports. He's just a joy to listen to when he talks about football, when he talks about sports in general. You can feel it. I mean, the passion is genuine. That enthusiasm is just genuine. Greg St. James over in Japan, Gridiron Japan. Greg St. James, he tells a story very clear. He gets right to the point when he tells it. He has a very solid delivery. Uh, Again, Gridiron Japan, check out that channel, guys. I highly encourage you guys, if you want to know more about football in Japan, really check out Greg's channel, Gridiron Japan. Uh, Mark Zanetto, how he dissects questions and answers it with such clarity. That's what I get out of my interview with Mark. Really good stuff from him. Darrien Starling, cool, calm, and collected. That's how I would describe my interview with Darrien. Cool, calm, and collected. He paints the picture for special moments very well. You'll get that when you listen to Darrien. Tony Reali, what needs to be said about him? Yeah, exciting. He obviously has that presence of a TV show host, which he did for decades. And Tony, he just invites you into his world and he makes you feel welcome. You're not a stranger when you're invited into Tony's world. He wants you to be a part of stuff. So I really appreciate the help that Tony Rowley gave me. Absolutely. Bomber, Nathan Brown, Bomber from the College Football Mafia. Very welcoming guy, friendly, kind, friendly. Bomber, in my opinion, he represents the gold standard of casual. And I mean that in a good way, of course. Casual, kind, friendly, just a blast to listen to Bomber and to have a chat with him. Jake Bolden, Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders fan, very thoughtful. He cares about what he says. Uh, I like the delivery of his answers in our interview. He does good stuff. Check out his channel too. John Lewis, informative. Once again, informative. He leaves no stone unturned when he tells his story about stuff when it comes to spring football. Really good stuff. Sharp, sharp cookie. Um, Roger Phipps, very technical and detailed when he talks about stuff. And Roger, he'll let you know what the key parts are to a story and to an answer of his. So I really appreciate that. I think the longest interview was with Roger. Um, Ryan Winter, Oregon Ducks fan, he stays true to himself. That's what I do appreciate so much about Ryan is that he stays true to himself. What you see and hear from him is what you get. That's basically Ryan. Again, good stuff. I mean, again, listening to Ryan, just just a blast. Darayus Sethna, fellow Ohio Bobcats fan, he's a true representative of someone who lived in Athens, Ohio, and spent time there on the Ohio University Athens campus. I mean, the love and dedication that he had for Southeastern Ohio in general, the love and dedication for Southeastern Ohio in general, just you can feel it. It's genuine. So I was so honored to have him as a special guest. And lastly, Philip Price, aka Wild Ute. Excellent balance, in my opinion, excellent balance between fun and charismatic, but also bold and blunt. I mean, he just established that balance right off the bat. Philip Price, Wild Ute, just amazing stuff. You could feel, again, you could feel the passion from him when he tells stories about the Utah Utes or the Kansas State Wildcats. So, and lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this guy, a longtime friend of mine. I've known him for many years, Tim Perry. Even though episode one of Steven Interviews You, despite all its faults, because the production value of that episode, it was the first episode, the production value of it wasn't up to par as you see these days from me. But Tim Perry, longtime friend, I have to mention him, and he will be included in this. Even though I had that interview with Tim back in 2023, yeah, we really have Tim Perry to thank for really getting the engine started for all this. Um, very kind, very nice and just kind individual Tim Perry is. Frontier League baseball historian. Um, what can I say about Tim Perry? Uh, I have him to thank a lot for so much of what you're seeing right now. Without Tim, I don't know if any of this gets going, to be honest with you guys. So really take out the time to thank Tim Perry. If you guys leave a comment here under this video, I hope you guys do. Please comment. Uh, I really encourage you guys to comment under this video. Tim Perry, if you are listening to this, thank you so much for helping me get started with all this. And with all of you guys that I've interviewed in 2025, again, thank you so much for allowing me to take out the time to just sit down and have that casual chat with you all. It really puts it into a great perspective about what we do as college football fans, college sports fans in general. I can't say it enough. Thank you all for what you've done. You've made this a thing. You've helped make this a thing, and I give you guys the credit. I don't want to take any credit for this. I want you guys, all of you guys I just mentioned, to take the credit. Without you, this doesn't get going. So thank you all. Everyone I've just mentioned here on this list, everyone that I've interviewed in 2025, thank you all so much for allowing Steven Interviews You to become a thing. I am truly appreciative, and always feel free to reach out to me, guys. Contact me about anything else that you guys might have planned, because I'm always willing to listen. So, with that, let's just get going to the compilation of clips that you're about to listen to. Again, sit back and enjoy. Next question, moving on here. And this is just about your YouTube channel, John Kurtz. What really inspired or motivated you to start your YouTube channel? What really got it going?
Yeah, I always have to the genesis of it. I always have to give a shout out to my guy Carrington Harrison, he's a radio host in Kansas City. Now probably the top one, arguably, certainly the top one in Kansas City, and he was somebody that I've been friends with for a while. You know, would go on his show sometimes, but I was doing. I guess I really have to start with the backstory of. So I get hired in like 2010 as an intern at the local radio station in Manhattan. Stuck around, worked my way up, got a full-time job when I graduated in 2011. And I was started as a producer for a 2 hour daily talk show, eventually became the main host in like 2014. So I had been hosting for a while, just doing my own daily radio show there among some of the other stuff, game broadcasts and whatnot involved with K-State. And Carrington was a pretty early adopter, at least for like radio guys doing this. I feel like, like 2017, 2018, there weren't nearly as many. It's not like now you can find any show that's doing any kind of content on YouTube. And he told me one time, he's like, man, I'm actually making a little bit of money off this. Like you should put your stuff on YouTube. And for me, he was like, I know you're frustrated sometimes that you got sort of a small platform being in Manhattan. Like this is YouTube's the number. I always remember him saying, he's like, it's the number 2 search engine in the world behind Google. Like just get your stuff out there and more people will find you. And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And it was pretty easy. And I just started taking segments that I had done on air that day, like they had already run on radio, and I just would um, package them. I had a little bit of a video editing background, mostly from high school, but like I said, shout out to my high school broadcast program, taught me pretty well. So I knew how to whip up a video really quick, and I just started doing that to see if I could get some traction. And it did it for like the first 2 years, 2.5 years of it, maybe. Didn't do a whole lot, but K-State fans, it did help me get some extra reach, I would say, with K-State fans probably. And, I could get a couple thousand views on some videos, and I was feeling a little bit better about that. And it was at least just a way for me to try and broaden my horizon, because I always felt like, man, I'm doing a really good job here, but there's only so many people in Manhattan, Kansas that are listening on radio. Then what really blew it up, I mean, the irony of it all, right? The angry Big 12 fan here about it, the league's lot in life. I mean, what blew it up was Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC. I'll never forget the day. I had already planned an entire show. I was driving into the radio station, pulled into the parking lot, and was just about to get up and walk in, probably like 45 minutes before my show started. And I looked at my phone before I went in and I saw a text from someone that was like, "Hey, is this real?" And it was the original Brent Zwerneman tweet from the Houston Chronicle about Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC. And I was like, oh boy, well, that changes things. Um, so I did the same thing I typically did. I took what I thought was my best segment from the day, put it on the YouTube channel, and it was something, I think it was even just called like what, it's probably still there on the channel. I'm sure it is. What does realignment mean for K-State or something like that? It was even geared toward K-State, but because of that conference realignment in the topic, it went wild. I mean, it had, for me, 10, 15 times the views that a video of mine usually would get. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Maybe there's something here. And so then I just started leaning into that. I can't remember at what point I actually started making YouTube specific content and moved away from just taking the radio segments. But I just followed it. I just remember that first, July, August, September of 2021 was crazy. I had always been, I so yearned for a bigger platform, and it was incredible. Like it was just the channel was growing like wildfire, dude. You put content out every day, and there was so much happening with realignment that I was gaining subscribers just like crazy, hundreds a day, and I had never seen or experienced anything like that. And so it was really exciting, and it was just a whirlwind, still doing the radio show and then doing that extra content on top of it and just figuring it all out on the fly after just having a really, kind of sleepy YouTube channel for a while there, just really small audience wise. So it blew up very fast over the course of like 4, 5, 6 months, and at least became like, within the ballpark of what it is now. And then it's been, kind of a more steady trickle since then. But those are fun times. And I sometimes, it's like maybe it would have been nice to slow down and take a breath more in those moments, because that was a cool thing. Like I'll never really forget that, how that ascension really happened. And it's not like my channel's huge or anything at all right now, like 24,000 subscribers or whatever. But for me, it was a big deal. And I never imagined at the time, I just didn't realize, like, hey, the fact that I started this thing just as kind of like yeah, I'll throw some stuff on here, could turn into something that could be something that's lasted for a really long time for me and given me an important outlet once I left the broadcast industry to sort of still have a foot in there.
Continuing on with that, I would like to talk about the Frank Solich years of
Okay.
Nebraska, because I think that's a good segue into what goes back into what the Ohio Bobcats have been doing lately and in their history. But just the Frank Solich era in Nebraska. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Whoa, that's a lot.
If you could put it in a
Uh,
nutshell.
you know what? I think that when the Frank was the obvious heir apparent to Tom Osborne, and I think that also just made him. It just screwed him. You know. Here's the thing. Right now, there's still people, particularly my age, that will say, "Well, they should have never fired Frank." Well, they were always going to have to fire Frank because of this. If you believe that Tom Osborne was a legendary coach, which I believe he's offensively, he was a mastermind. And the second area is he knew how to get players to respond. And he had a coaching staff that was, his two guys next to him, Milt and, oh, come on, defensive coordinator. Milt Tenniper was the offensive line guy, and then the defensive coordinator. And oh my God, my brain is not working. But they had an exceptional coaching staff, and they had coaches that knew how to motivate the players. And then you give that job to Frank. First of all, I think he got screwed because Tom made him keep his existing coaches. And I think when you go, okay, you're in charge now, that person in charge should always be able to pick who they want around him. And that's not a knock on the old Nebraska coaches. It's just a matter of organizing and having a team, a group of coaches that work together cohesively. Frank should have been allowed to pick his own coaches. Uh, he was always going to be fired because he's not Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne is Nick Saban, Tom Osborne, probably, because Osborne just, 25 years of never losing more than 3 games in a season and never winning less than 9. That's not normal by any means. And then you're the guy that replaces him. I mean, I don't know. That's like me walking on stage after to sing, after everybody's already sing Katy Perry or something. If you're Katy Perry, that's a horrible comparison because I just compared my terrible singing to Frank, and Frank was a better coach than that. Anyway, I do think it was terrible that he was fired after a 9-3 season. I think it was terrible that he just finally got to get his own coaches for 1 year, and then he was fired by a megalomaniac, Steve Peterson, who, probably still the most hated man in Nebraska. So I think that Frank was a good coach. The problem is he wasn't a great coach. At least for Nebraska, he was never going to be able to measure up to Tom, and that's really, that's the problem. So
Yeah, so for Frank Solich, as a segue into the Ohio Bobcats, their football history, just to give you some perspective, the Ohio Bobcats, before Frank Solich came to Athens, Ohio, the Bobcats were, let's just be honest, they were terrible. From 1978 to 2004, they had a combined record of 95 and 197. They were pretty bad.
yeah,
And that's between 6 head coaches in that time span. So when Frank came along, when he was able to do his thing to bring his own people for his coaching staff with the Ohio Bobcats, things just went well. Things just clicked.
yeah.
And we actually got to see Frank Solich as a real head coach in that time frame from 2005 to 2020, which Frank Solich with the Ohio Bobcats, he went 115 and 82. So that right
Yeah.
there, talk about changing the culture of a football program right there. He was
I
exactly what Ohio needed. Yeah.
I had one of my best friends in college, one of my roommates for a few years, is a speech professor at the University of Ohio, and he told me years ago, before Frank came along, they would show up to watch the band at halftime, and then people would leave
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
if anybody showed up at all. So, I have some idea of how bad Ohio was before he got there. But yeah, you're right. I think that's a condition of being able to, be at the right place in the right time, and a place where you can fit and where you can do your own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that on your channel, you mentioned that you spent 30 years as a TV sports reporter slash anchor.
Right.
Uh, can you tell me what that was like? Because that sounds like a long journey in and of itself.
It was a long journey. I started off, in a really small town, which was my own, kind of hometown. So it was cool. But, I got to cover a lot of University of Kentucky sports there. And I did that for about 3 years. And then I did some news, and I went to North Carolina, on the coast of North Carolina, worked at an ABC affiliate there. And I was doing news there, and I decided, sports was a lot more fun, and it's something I enjoyed a lot more. And then the sports director job came open at my old station that I'd been to previously. Got the call, and they were like, "If you want the job, it's yours." And I said, "Okay." And I worked in sports there as sports director for another 3 years, and then came to here in Louisville, Kentucky, worked for the Fox affiliate as a sports reporter and anchor for 20 years. And I loved it because I got to see a lot of things and meet a lot of people on the company dime that, had I been in any other kind of position, I never would have met these people, and certainly like had one-on-one time with them. I got to see a lot of things. I got to cover several Final Fours. I covered 20 Kentucky Derbies. I got to go to a lot of really cool venues in both basketball and football. So it was fun, and it was a passion of mine. And, it's the broadcast industry has changed quite a bit, especially, locally. And about 4 years ago or so, I decided, I need to do something else. And because I just felt like it just feels like in local television these days, and a lot of people out there watching might see it in their own local markets, there's been a little bit of value that has been taken away from local sports coverage. And I was starting to see that in this market here in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's when I decided I was going to do something else. But I wanted to do something that still spoke to the passion that I had. And, when I started to look, Stephen, at public relations jobs, they all wanted video editing experience, but they wanted it on Adobe Premiere, which I had not used. So I said, what's the way that's going to how can I force myself to make myself learn Adobe Premiere? And I'd always kicked around the idea of a YouTube channel. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to launch a YouTube channel that will make me learn Adobe Premiere editing. And I did. And then about 2 months later, I was able to kind of know enough. And then I got a PR job, but I use different, editing software now. But the point being is like that was what kind of spurred me. But it was I regret nothing. It was a 30-year career that was a lot of fun. And like I said, I went to a lot of places, met a lot of people, and didn't spend a lot of my own money doing that.
Alternate football leagues, spring football leagues, starting in other countries other than the United States, because I've seen,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, because I've seen a lot of attempts to grow the game of American football overseas. And I've had a conversation in the past with Greg St. James. He's based in Japan. He was telling me about what was going on there in Japan. What are your thoughts internationally about American football leagues?
I had a friend of mine who I'd grown up with who played he played in Germany in the 90s. And he said, even then, he said this was in a much smaller football league. And he said, because there's a passion there for American football that it just seems to be like nobody's really seeing on a community level. Certainly, the NFL has had a global reach for decades. And, we saw the European League of Football, which I really wish had been a little more accessible here in the United States, because the level of play for a lot of these teams was really good, but it was just hard to find. And I don't think a lot of people were going to pay, whatever it was, $12 or $13 a month to watch it or whatever it was. So I think that there is an international appeal with American football. And I think it's strong. And I think the NFL has exploited that. And that was one of the reasons, as you know, that NFL Europe ended up folding shop, because the NFL really figured out that we don't have to put leagues here. We can just keep bringing games over here rather than try to field an entire league. And we're going to get sellout stadiums. We've seen it all year this year. We're going to continue to see it this weekend and beyond. So it's just, I think sometimes maybe that might undermine some of these communities who are trying to start these leagues. And I know that there's another European league that is kind of the fallout of whatever's happened with ELF. So, I hope it catches on. I think, to me, personally, I think it's a great game, and I think there's a reason that it has global appeal. As you know, Stephen, football is a simple game. People try to make it complicated, but it's a simple game. And I think it speaks to people all over the world. And I would love to see some of these leagues catch on, because more football is good football. It's good for everybody. And it's an opportunity. And that's why, like I said, a guy I grew up with and went to high school with got to play in Germany, and you get to see a lot of things. And we've seen a lot of the UFL and, former XFL, USFL standouts play in some of these other leagues. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to me when I hear of new leagues starting up, whether internationally or here in the United States. Yeah. And that's where I'm going to go to next. When it comes to alternate football leagues, over the years, I seem to follow the arena leagues a lot, like arena football. But I've noticed that it's had a lot of trouble over the years getting traction. What are your thoughts on arena football leagues?
I started reaching out, got some feedback from a couple of YouTubers to let me know kind of how they got started. But I wasn't going to do it by myself. I don't do anything well by myself in real life. I have to have family and friends and support around me. So I wanted to have a team. And the first and easiest way that I could think of as a BYU fan to get started would be to do a show with a Utah fan. And it took me well over 9 months to find a Utah fan that would even have a conversation with me. And it was really frustrating me. And then one day I came across the Wild Ute, and I'd done 2 or 3 shows by myself, but I was able to talk him into coming on and doing a show with me. And we originally started as a rivalry show. But as we were covering realignment, the business of college football, everything it takes to hike a football once a year, we decided just over time that we were going to do all of college football. So that's when Moen came on. His talent is back end. He knows how to do everything that you do for your show every day. He takes care of that for us. Super smart. And since then, we've just been growing, just covering all college football and everything that goes around college sports. And it's something that we're all passionate about, because as you know, you don't get rich doing this unless you make big institutional changes. And we're not there yet. We're still doing baby steps. But the idea is just get together with a bunch of good people and just have fun. Just talk. You can jaw, you can argue. If you've watched our show at all that you know that I argue with Ute and Moen all the time. And we're not talking baby arguments. We're talking about, we're yelling at each other, right? We're really passionate about what we believe. But what's great about that is in the background, when the show's over, that's it, right? We respect each other enough that stuff does not carry any weight when they go into their regular life. So I feel very grateful that I've come across with some people that can put up with me. And I think they would say that the parts that they bring is unique as well. And we wouldn't be successful without everybody.
So as a quick follow-up question, College Football Mafia, the name itself, who came up with the name College Football Mafia, and how did that get started? Like College Football Mafia, how did that just get going?
I came up with it. It was shortly after BYU was admitted to the Big 12. I was trying to reach out and talking to creators and just people on shows that might want to talk about the stuff I wanted to talk about. And I came across this one guy from the 365 Sports Show, and he and I made contact. I think it was on Twitter, and he says, "Well, you know what we need is a mafia. What we need is a Big 12 protection racket, essentially." And I said, "I love it. Let's do it." And he didn't want to do it. So it was we had just mentioned it in this one sentence. I took that and flipped it around and made it a whole thing. And now we do have a bunch of people who contribute. Sergeant Pickles and Becky Go Huskies and Rock and Rant and Daniel Gygax. The list goes on and on and on. But again, none of this would work if, one, we didn't work and respect each other as a team, and two, I hadn't had really good mentors that took their time to sort of help me get started. In this business, there's a bunch of shortcuts you can do, or you can do stuff the hard way. And I decided to take the shortcuts. So the only way I could think to do that was get with other creators, and they could help me sort of break the system so I didn't have to do it the slow way.
Then also playing it Little League level and watching it before cartoons or anything else. Those are the first memories that I have about football.
Yeah. So I was wondering about that because I always noticed the K-State flag behind you as well as the Utah flag. So yeah,
That's right.
K-State. So that was a question I was going to ask about your connection with Kansas State. So I'm glad you brought that up. So going into that, what was it that that made the change between from Kansas State to Utah? What was that like?
So Steven, check this out. So when I got into high school, I thought I was for sure going to go to K-State. I'd really applied to 3 schools. Okay, I applied to Arizona State, K-State, and the University of Utah. I grew up in Utah in Salt Lake City. We moved here when I was about 10 years old. And at that time, it was a really tough decision. I was pretty immature and stuff, as like, an 18-year-old kid. And I went with my dad, and we took a trip out to Kansas State on a tour of the university. I hadn't like lived away like for 8, 10 years. We hadn't moved. So I really knew Salt Lake as my home. And when we were there, it just wasn't ready to make a move and go somewhere else. I kind of wanted to stay closer to home. He took me to his old frat house and everything and met a bunch of people over there. And like I thought for sure that I would have gone to K-State. But then I just decided to stay local. Like our family's here local too. So I decided to go to the University of Utah instead. And I wasn't a Utah fan before that. I was a K-State fan. And so like all my high school buddies before that, they knew me as a K-State fan, right? Nothing for Utah. I didn't like BYU much. And I can get into that on a tangent because that happened before I became a Ute, well before. But really, I went to the University of Utah, and it happened to be like the perfect fire of when to go to that school. Like I already mentioned to you, I love football before that. I've loved it since I've been like a small kid. And the first year at Utah happened to be the second year that Urban Meyer was the coach of Utah. So you might remember that. That was the BCS Buster year, the first BCS Buster year. So grow up a K-State fan, go to Utah, and all of a sudden freaking Utah's making their own rise, right? In football. And Urban Meyer's there, and the people are just so jazzed and jacked, which was shocking because at that time, right before that, like University of Utah was known as a basketball school. In 1998, the Utes made the national championship game in basketball. Everything was about basketball. All the momentum was around basketball, and football was a secondary afterthought. But there was a shift with the University of Utah at that time, right when I stepped on campus, with Urban Meyer changing everything. And that year is when really the football buzz grew at Utah and started. So I was right there on the ground floor and stuff when that started at Utah. So after that, so that season, Utah played Pitt in the Fiesta Bowl. So I got to go down to the Fiesta Bowl again with my fraternity at that time as a Ute fan, and all of us down there and just absolutely drilled Pitt and trolling the Pitt fans and having so much dang fun. And I fell in love with the University of Utah and football that time, specifically Utah football. And then since then, it's been pretty high times for the Utes, you know?
Yeah. So obviously, there was a lot of buzz about Utah football back then in those days, and even now. So I might as well ask this. What are some of your favorite Utah Utes football games that you can remember? If you could put it down in like a list. 10. What is it like, the culture in Washington State, the campus? What is that generally like?
Well, it's a party town, that's for sure. If you're Pullman is a very small town, so if you're there, you're going to school there, or you're there to like tailgate for a football game, or you're there to go back and have a good time. It's the vibes around Pullman on a game day are like no other. The falls in Pullman are amazing. The temperature, just the vibes. It's a big party, you could say. Mike Leach during the game day when Oregon came to town, he said it's like Woodstock, but everyone has their clothes on. It's the same type of thing. It's a big party. It's a great time.
That's great. I've heard a lot of good stories about Washington State the football on game day, so it's very interesting. So in recent years, both Washington State and Oregon State combined, they've been going through issues related to conference realignment with the Pac-12 as it was constructed before. What are your thoughts on that, on Oregon State and Washington State, what they're going through with the old Pac-12, that legal battles and all that? Could you take
Yeah, I mean,
viewers through that? Yeah.
yeah, it's very unfortunate what has happened because the history of the Pac-12, the Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, it's the Conference of Champions as they call themselves. I mean, just all of those schools. It was a great time and great competition and every year. And like I mentioned, when I was going there and the years after, Washington State was consistently ranked. Oregon State has been ranked. Like these are solid universities that deserve the respect of a national spotlight. And of course, SEC this, Big Ten that, Big 12, all that. And the Pac-12 has had one of the better conferences for a good amount of time, and they're right up there with the top of them. And so to see these schools jump, I believe it started with Oregon and USC, UCLA, UW. They all ended up going to the Big Ten. It's just unfortunate to see what's happened since then. But then the fact that Washington State and Oregon State have teamed up to keep a hold of the conference, and instead of letting it dissolve like all of the other universities expected to happen, they've been able to stay strong and fight the battles in court, win the battles in court. Now they have complete control over the assets, where the departing universities just figured that we would just give up and just go away, and that everything that they would get their money and assets would be dispersed. But Washington State and Oregon State banded together. They were able to win some battles, and now they're rebuilding. Of course, the new Pac-12 is not going to be what it was in the past, and that's unfortunate. But at the same time, it's all you can do is look forward, and let's hope that we can, keep bringing in more universities to keep building it out. There's going to be a new media deal coming soon, and hopefully we can, show that we should still be on a national stage.
So, another follow-up question to that would be Oregon State and Washington State. They obviously joined forces. What has conversations been like between Oregon State Beavers fans and Washington State Cougars fans?
Yeah, I mean, it's been awesome. I went to the Pac-2 championship last year in Corvallis, Washington State playing Oregon State. Now this next year, they're going to have a home and home. So Washington State will play at Oregon State, and then Oregon State will head to Pullman. I walked around interviewing, people, and everyone's super, it's like we're brothers. It's not like we're rivals. It's like we're brothers. Of course, we want to win, and there's like a mini rivalry there, but we're banded together, and I think there's just the camaraderie. It's not like against UW to where we literally hate each other, like probably a little too much. With Oregon State, it's very, very cordial and great fan base.
Not just for the Beavers, but just for anybody else you guys would play back in the day. Who do you consider to be fierce rivals of the Oregon Ducks?
Well, of course, the Beavs, historically, I think there was a lot of Duck fans that just they discredit the Beavs so much that they don't even really want them to be a rival. So they looked up to Washington as the rival, right? Washington was really good through the 70s, 80s, early 90s, and from basically the mid 90s, early 2000s, all the way through till just recently, within the last 5 years, Oregon has really controlled that rivalry. And, within the last 5 years, that rivalry has been awesome because Oregon's been good. Washington's been good. A couple of years ago, we had Bo Nix against Michael Penix up there in Seattle. That game was phenomenal. Because I live in Portland, I never missed that Husky game in Seattle. And, but I used to love the Beav game. The Beavs are our rival. They're our neighbors. We see them all over the place. They hate us. They absolutely hate us. I mean, I have old women at the bank telling me I'm wearing the wrong hat. They're confrontational. They just don't like us. And then when the whole conference broke up and they were left like the band on the Titanic with the Pac-12, buddy, it got worse. Now it's a loathing situation. They literally despise us. And so I think that's part of the goal when it comes to a rivalry is you want to have a little bit of heat. And we had that with the Beavs. And, I'm a high school teacher. Last night we had our high school rivalry game, and it is heated. I mean, there is no love lost between those teams at all. And you can throw out the record books just because there's so much passion and whatnot out on the field. But things get weird in that rivalry game. And now it's like Oregon and Oregon State have to be, or Oregon State and Washington State have to be quote unquote rivals, even though they're actually co-conspirators. They're partners, and so it's a weird situation. So yes, historically, I used to love the Beav game. I used to love going to that. I went to as many as I could my whole life. I've only missed like 5 of them. I used to like to go to the basketball games of the Beavs. Baseball, of course, that's their best sport. Last year, we swept them in baseball. I mean, how good did that taste? You know, that it's completely different than beating Washington, right? Washington is kind of a canned rivalry. It's kind of an artificial rivalry brought to you by, you know, insert whoever is the sponsor deal of that game, right? Versus the Oregon State game, the Oregon State rivalry, we don't need a sponsor for that. That's sponsored by pure good old fashioned hate. And it's fueled really on their side. I think the Ducks could really care less half the time, which makes them even more furious. It just adds fuel to the fire. So yeah, no, I like the Beav rivalry more than the Washington rivalry, but I do respect the Washington rivalry. And when you look to the rest of the country and you look and you compare things like Oregon and Washington, could that be something that we see like a Florida, Georgia, or a Ohio State, Michigan, right, where it's a cross-state rivalry instead of an in-state rivalry? We're so used to the in-state stuff here because everybody in our old conference had the in-state rival, right? So, and that was already built in for 100 years. So it's kind of hard to change that tradition overnight. But we're getting used to it, and so now the Huskies are our rival, and which is fine because we haven't liked the Huskies for years. But it is kind of a weird situation when everybody kind of forces you to no longer have the rivalry with the Beavs, and we're not even going to play them in football next year. So, I mean, talk about getting crazy. That's a wild one for me.
Yeah. So now that you guys are in the Big Ten, and you've been in the Big Ten for years now, looking at the rest of the conference, who would you consider, if not already, who would you consider to be your rivals? Of like players that have come from those colleges that are trying to make their way over to the United States to continue their playing careers in the United States?
You've got maybe one or two examples, but um, they usually don't. They usually don't. It's really a hard, because of the language, because of the language. English is taught in Japan, but the quality of English language education here is not very good. So having those English skills is something that, you know, for if a Japanese player dreams of playing football in the United States, well, they should be learning English every day. And I say this as somebody who's very bad about learning Japanese every day. But that's how they're going to make it in America and American football. If they want to play in America if they want to go to American college, play American football, the English language skills are really number one, and then after that, it's your athletic ability.
Yeah, and I was bringing that up because it has started to be a topic of sorts here in the United States, international recruiting, as in college programs here in America recruiting talent from abroad, from other countries. So I was just wondering from that standpoint if there would be like any opportunities for Japanese players to be possibly recruited to American colleges.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and one I really don't know the answer to. But what I can tell you is, I mean, honestly, I've been here it's going on 3 years this year, and a lot's changed in America. Especially a lot's changed in terms of education, how education's funded. You know, I went to a college what had at the time when I went 14,000 students, and it's now half of that in enrollment. So the nature of higher education is changing, and in terms of NIL and all that stuff. Now, my question to you is, why the push for international students? Because, I mean, is there a need for international? I mean, are people saying there's a need to branch out and get more bodies from outside the United States?
Well, from what I gather, from what I hear, there's been like just discussions, not aggressively, but just there have been like discussions from like various college football fans, and also conferences, because we can see what's going on with the college football with all these powerful conferences, the
Right.
SEC, Big Ten, all those guys, that they're branching out with all their media deals with ESPN and all these networks, and now they're starting to get into like streaming networks like Netflix and places like that. And so they're trying to expand their footprint, not just in the United States. They're trying to expand more globally, so to speak. So that's why these discussions have been kind of starting to take place.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would not be surprised to see, you know, college foot. We'll just use college football as a general overview, but branching out with international deals, because there is trying to watch major college football here in Japan. Man, that's hard. I mean, I have to find a pirate YouTube feed or something coming in for me to watch a big game. Or, ESPN is changing their whole model now and coming out with a pay for service. But, we all pay enough for football as it is. And I don't know how many people are willing to plunk down the money to have full access to all ESPN. But then
These teams,
Mhm.
you wrote for them. How'd you get noticed? How'd you get into that?
Yeah, I
What was
think
the
that
process like?
it's different for everybody who wants to break in the business. And the advice I would give to anybody now, especially young people when I talk to high schools and colleges, but it's the same advice that I would give to you. And the same advice I gave myself this summer, Stephen, is to do what you're doing right now. Roll, turn on the camera, turn on your computer, start rolling, and just put in some great time in front of a camera talking, and doesn't need to go anywhere. It could, I mean, you're on the biggest streaming service in the world right now. You can be on YouTube. But my point is, that was not the case when I was breaking into the business. But even just recording your voice talking and doing interviews and taking on interviews with pros, taking on interviews with your sister and your brother, it really doesn't matter. It's just, I was physically, in my younger years, in front of the TV describing the plays that were happening in the Yankee game or Giants game, right? That's play-by-play. But now a person of this generation can actually record it and put it on the internet. That's great. But what then became my real passion was sports talk, So how did I get noticed? Well, I wanted to be, name your play-by-play announcer, Mike Bream, Bob Costas when he was doing play-by-play, Kevin Harlan, whoever you like now, Gus Johnson. And I have people in my universe, my college friends who are doing that, right? My personality and my energy was just a couple dials different. And I think you could sense that from this interview so I'm a communicator, but I get very excited. And there are some guys who do it great. Harlan and Johnson would be two guys I would, as an example of being excitable play-by-play announcers who do it right. Mine was not right. Mine was a little too wacky and crazy, but it came into a place where I was better situated for sports talk. So now we're thinking about the great radio shows maybe you grew up with in Ohio. For me, it was Mike and the Mad Dog in New York. Sports talk. But, you got to put in your time for that too. That's not how I did it. It's how I would have done it, but I happen to also like sports trivia, Stephen. I think you do too, right?
Yep.
Sports fans love knowing everything, right? So I submitted and got a job being a researcher and a writer for a sports trivia show that happened to be on ESPN. How? Right place, right time. I was in New York. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire had taken over the world as far as game shows, and they were thinking about a sports spinoff. And then I became a writer on that show. It was hosted by Kenny Mayne. It's called A 2-Minute Drill, and it was on ESPN. That's how I came into the ESPN universe. This is in the year 2000 now. So I'm a writer and a researcher. And then the advent of what became debate on TV timed out to exactly this moment. And part of the interruption had not launched yet, but they were looking for somebody to be on staff and be the researcher and work with the show in informing the writing of the show and the arguments. And then I met Tony and Mike, and that's when everything changed, because they saw my personality as a want to be sportscaster, and they said, let's make you the sidekick. So that's when things are hard to use as an example of this is the way to do it. That was a fluky thing, but you have to understand with life, even yourself, Stephen, who knows where this is going to go right now. If this goes viral, you're in the position to be in a place where people are going to see you. And then, fluky or not, It's how you respond and take that opportunity, right? And I think PTI being the best debate show of all time helped.
So I actually have a long background going all the way back to the early 2000s when I was in high school of kind of being involved in artistic expression. I was a rapper under the moniker Il Luciato. You can find some of my music online. And if you listen to Night Watch or you tune into Night Watch, the introduction song on that show is actually me on the keyboard and with the music and me actually doing the chorus there. So I kind of already had an expertise in Pro Tools and audio recording, and I had some audio equipment, microphones, speakers, things like that. And so a few years ago, I want to say during the pandemic, I'm a pro football fan too. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I'm a Rutgers sports fan. And so during the pandemic, I found myself when I was looking for content related to pro football, I didn't get enough just from, logging on to local radio down in Miami or listening to the local sports here in New Jersey, New York, or even TV. So I found myself starting to go to YouTube, where a lot of people had started their own channels to discuss topics I was interested in and where it was almost an endless stream of content so I could get my fix. And so I'm sitting there. I have a little bit of extra time during the pandemic. I have these microphones because I do music recording. I had done podcasts in the past. I had The Blatant Minority. I have Logic and Larry. These are more like current events, political podcasts. I was a poli-sci major at Rutgers. So I'm sitting there, I have all these microphones, these speakers, this equipment, and I'm like, I could do a podcast. I already am used to kind of broadcasting. I took a lot of communications courses to go along with the audiological training in school. Let me just fire this thing up and start talking. And I started Fanatic Fury, which was a Dolphins channel. That took off pretty well and did good. This guy, TD Finns Talk, some of the bigger players put me on. So now I'm sitting there about a year or two after that. And I'm a huge Rutgers sports fan. I went to Rutgers for undergraduate. I went to Rutgers for law school, both times at the Newark campus. I spent a lot of time in the New Brunswick campus growing up in Freehold, New Jersey. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, Rutgers as a school doesn't have a ton of podcast or YouTube content. Now, they have a few players that are already, either active journalists or run some of the big sites. But I said, you know what? There's actually a void and an opportunity there with Rutgers. Now I really know what I'm doing from Fanatic Fury. And I have the audiological background. I know a heck of a lot about Rutgers because so first of all, I was a fan, but there was a SB Nation had a Rutgers site called On the Banks. And Aaron Brightman, who's a notable podcaster now with the Scarlet Faithful, he was running On the Banks for a time. And at one point, he just put out an open call. Anybody who's interested in writing for On the Banks, send me a writing sample and, see if you could volunteer to write some content. I also had a background being a lawyer and just writing in writing, and I had an interest in journalism. So I sent him a writing sample. He brought me onto On the Bank. So I was already for a time writing about Rutgers athletics for On the Banks, actual articles, typing them out. And so when it came time to start the podcast, I felt I had some basis in covering Rutgers, some basis in the community as somebody who people might recognize from writing about the team. I had the background with the audio. So in my apartment in Newark, I fired up the microphone. I came up with Night Watch. I wanted Nightline, but see, there's at the actual college at night after certain sports games, there's already a program on the real radio called Nightline. So I had to come up with Night Watch. And I thought that still worked, came up with it, fired it up and started rolling. And I got a lot of support out of the gate. A lot of just everyday listeners were out there. The College Huddle, which is a network of podcasts and content creators, all for college athletics. Every conference is represented. They reached out to me, Zach Guggenheim, shout out to Sean Morosi, who put me on with him. And they kind of got me a little bit more clout, and I was off to the races. So that's kind of the story of how I started it.
What conference they could join, talk about Big 12 or maybe ACC. Just your opinion. Where do you see those talks going, Mark, within like a few years from now?
Well, let me ask you a question to clarify.
Okay.
Do you think it's more of a question around the best fit culturally, or where I think they're going to go?
Realistically, where do you think they're going to wind up?
Realistically, if they, I'll put a caveat. If they have another year where they win 9-10 games, I think those invites will start to come. Big 12, if the ACC loses, I feel like, there was a lot of BS talk about North Carolina going to the SEC. Good now that Bill Belichick's there. It's possible, but that's not happening until the contract with the ACC runs out, in terms of, I think it's like 2030. So if by, I'll use that as a caveat, by 2030, when a lot of these media rights deals are kind of coming to be redone, you could see some more conference realignment. Could things happen like in principle sooner than that? Like, hey, we have an agreement to go to the Big 12 in 2030 or the ACC. Absolutely. But I don't think any UConn fan has to worry about conference realignment from a football perspective, or their precious Big East, which I obviously love because it's our brand. I don't have an answer for you, like concrete, but if you put a gun to my head and said which school is, or which conference is UConn going to go to, I think it's probably the Big 12, because I think there's a people don't forget about this. UConn had an opportunity to go to the ACC, and anybody that listens to this can Google this. The ACC wanted UConn during that kind of big poach of the Big East back in the day, before they got annexed to the American, or was now the American Conference. Syracuse went, BC, Miami, Florida State, that whole thing. BC's athletic department absolutely blocked UConn from going to the ACC. They absolutely did that. UConn would have been in the ACC for the last, I don't even know when that happened, since mid 2000s. And so that is not something that UConn fans or administrations forget. And I know it's not the same administration. Dave Benedict wasn't around then. But if the ACC came calling, it would have to be a pretty sweet deal, like right away. We get full rev share. We get all this, we get that, because it's kind of like almost like payback for, what they tried to do to UConn before. And if it's a difference between the ACC and the Big 12, I think from a cultural perspective, the ACC makes more sense, but then again, Stephen, the ACC has Cal and Stanford in it. So kind of from a visual standpoint, from like a regional aspect, nothing makes sense anymore. So dollars, it'll just come down to dollars and cents. I think both conferences have their appeal. As a basketball fan first, I think the Big 12 makes more sense, just because there's a lot more potential to have these new rivalries with Kansas, with Houston, and those guys aren't going anywhere. I know someone would say, "Well, Mark, what about Duke and the ACC?" Yep, that'd be true too. That'd be true as well. But the ACC as a whole, their brand has kind of started to dip a little bit, whereas the Big 12 is starting to ascend. And so I think I'd rather go on the ship that's going this way versus the one that's going this way.
Okay, so I only have a couple more questions before we wrap this up. So we'll get this one out of the way. The upcoming season, 2025 college football season for the UConn Huskies. You've reviewed their schedule. What culture for college sports? What is it generally like? Not just for game day, but just any other time.
Morgantown is a typical college town. I mean, it's very busy during football and basketball season, but it's not a big city by any means. So it's small town America. You know what I mean? It's you've got a lot of small businesses, a lot of independent business owners. Everybody knows everybody. I mean, it's just that type of feel. And then on Saturdays in the fall, man, it becomes a pretty big happening place, but it's just like any other small town America city. If you go to any small town college town, it's going to be similar, except the campus is a lot more spread out in Morgantown, and there's obviously a lot of hills you have to climb, but but yeah, it's just your typical college town, I would say.
Something going for their YouTube channels, whether it is about college sports or anything else. What advice would you have for them?
Number one, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to hit record and do that first video. Once you do that first one, it gets easier after that. Just continue honing your craft, because you'll get better. With your first video is not going to be a good video, I can tell you. But keep honing your craft, keep getting better, keep getting better. I mean, I still get better every day. At least I'm trying to. But educate yourself. There are a lot of other YouTube channels who teach YouTube. That's what they do. They teach YouTube. There are books out there you can read. There are articles. Educate yourself as much as you can on the YouTube algorithm, making videos, making thumbnails, making titles, how to keep people watching. I mean, you name it, right? Embrace your community, because without that, it's not really worth it. I mean, you don't want to just talk to a screen. You're talking to people, right? So embrace your community. And yeah, I mean, that's the biggest advice I guess I would have. But just don't be afraid, because you're going to screw up. You're going to feel silly at times, but over time it gets a lot easier and it gets a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like you said earlier, it takes a lot of time. It takes quite a bit of work to put in when you're making YouTube videos. I would know this offhand just from what I've done. So it's always a learning process for making YouTube videos.
Absolutely.
And for references, I always look to channels like yours and also others like Greg Flugar, another good example. Peek Around the Corner.
Absolutely.
That guy's amazing with what he does. So, I take bits and pieces of inspiration from these other channels, including yours, Goose, and I try to apply that to whatever I'm doing. So, yeah, I do have you to thank in part for this.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and you've got to take bits and obviously none of us are trying to steal anybody else's content.
No.
But you're getting ideas from it, right? And you're bouncing ideas off of each other sometimes. You're taking, that looks like a good topic. Maybe I need to do that on my show. Then you can do the same. Two shows can do the same topic. You know what I mean? Topics are not copywritten, right? You can still talk about it. Just put your own, do it. Be authentic is another thing I'd say. You have to be yourself, because if you're not, they will see through it. Your audience is smart. They're not stupid, and they will see through it if you're not authentic. So be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't worry. You obviously can't worry about what people think, because you are going to have some haters. That's part of the game. You got to ignore that stuff and just be yourself and do your best, and it all work out. And keep grinding. You got to keep grinding, obviously.
Keep grinding. What are some of the better food options out there for cats? What are typically some kinds of foods that you feed your cats?
Well, I mean, the ideal to me is a good quality raw food, which you can get frozen or freeze dried, or there are recipes to make it at home, or you can grind up burger or chicken and buy, what's called a completer. There's one called, Food for Life. I know the person who runs the company, so I can trust them. And you can just take meat you buy at the store, add this completer and feed that, and you're getting super low carbohydrate levels, high. I mean, you control the quality of the meat that way. And general guide is plenty of good quality meat, good moisture content, and minimal fillers. And pretty much anything other than meat is a filler.
Yeah.
So some are necessary because, just to get to process it, to make it hold together, Now we use, there's a company called Stella and Chewy's. We use their freeze-dried food, and we use frozen food raw called small batch. And you're looking at like 97 to 98% meat or, animal, parts, meats and organs and bones. And then, 2% plant matter or added ingredients. That's excellent. Now we feed a combination of raw and canned. For a long time, we used Fancy Feast Classic, which probably of the lower priced foods, that's probably the best just because it's low carb. But quality control is not. I mean, they're always, you get bad batches if you know. So we recently moved up to using Evangers, particularly their organic line, and Nulo, Nulo, their freestyle line. We typically feed the pate, you know, which just kind of looks, you know, it just is smooth, doesn't have chunks or anything. Other cats like chunky. Weruva is a good company. They have a wide variety. They used to advertise that they used basically human grade meat, you know, that it's the same, meets the same requirements as what we would eat. Tiki, most of theirs are seafood, which can be problematic, but they do have a number of non-seafood lines. And now, one of the tricks, if you are trying to buy a higher quality canned food, is that the 5.5 ounce cans are a lot cheaper to buy than the 3 ounce cans. If you're looking at the per ounce weight, you can actually get it down to a reasonable level. And the neat trick, the higher the quality food, the less of it the cat has to eat. If you look at just the bulk, dry food, cats have to eat a fair amount of it. Canned food, not as much. And raw food, actually, a 10-pound cat only needs about 4 ounces a day. So raw food looks hideously pricey when you look at, you know, just at the immediate price. But long term, because, you know, you feed less of it and you have a lot fewer problems, it does become not as outrageous as it looks. Now, having said that, current problem with raw food is bird flu. If you're buying, you know, any of the fowl, you know, chicken, turkey, that sort of thing, there is a risk of it being infected with bird flu. There's high pressure processing, which, you know, it doesn't cook the food, but it does destroy bacteria and it inactivates bird flu. The virus will still be there, but it won't be active. So if you are going to feed raw food, you need to, for the time being, make sure it's high pressure processed, and your odds are better if you avoid, you know, turkey, chicken, that sort of thing. Okay, I think that answered the question.
Other days, what is it like in Charlottesville?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you when we were talking last week. You know, Virginia's known as the wine and cheese university. And you know, so Jay and I, we had season tickets to football back when we were teenagers, and the stadium used to be sold out, and we played a lot of big teams, and it was a fun environment, no question. And so we're hoping to get back to those days. You know, the stadium now is on a big night, big game, 3/4 full. And but that's kind of the, would you agree, Jay, culture at Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's not great for football. And they're doing a lot of things. One of the guys that we're interviewing is like one of the marketing guys for the football department later on in the summer, to hear about all the new changes that they're implementing this year, to try to bring back the fans. Winning will solve those problems. You know, I think that's the biggest thing, is we haven't been very successful on the field for quite some time. Basketball attendance is great. The atmosphere is, you know, really good. Baseball attendance is great. Atmosphere is really good. But, you know, football is the driver. If you want to know about what other people think, you know, I would say, you know, if you Google like Colin Cowherd's UVA football take, you know, he did a bit
on Virginia football and wine and cheese, and it was pretty good. Even as a Virginia fan, I had to laugh at it, but it's well worth the YouTube search.
So you mentioned about University of Virginia football. That's had, good years, not so good years, but let's focus on the positive. In your guys' opinions, what are some of the best years in UVA football?
Well, I mean,
like when it comes to like tailgating or just to get a bite to eat, just any sort of like entertainment kind of things that you could experience there at Charlottesville.
You got to go to Mincer's. They've been there since 1948, and Mincer's is a UVA apparel shop. Jay and I went there when we were teenagers, and we were like, it was like kind of like heaven to us. I'm like, oh my God, like anything, any hat, any jersey, any shirt, anything you could think of, they've got it. So that's like a staple in Charlottesville. And I mean, Jay, you might want at the corner, and they have
I
two
was gonna say
locations.
the corner in general.
Yeah.
For those that aren't familiar with the recruit or the tailgating at UVA, it's kind of spread out a little bit. That's one of the complaints, I guess, of a lot of the fan base, is that it's not like Jeff and I at one point had season tickets to the Commanders, and that's just a big circle parking lot. As far as you can see, it's just tailgaters everywhere. Whereas Virginia is not like that. There is some tailgating around the stadium, but it's more spread out. And so, you get pockets of places that people will go, and people have relationships. We got to meet a bunch of tailgaters last year. We did a giveaway with the season opener, where we just went tailgate to tailgate and got people's emails, and they were entered to win a raffle from Mincer's, a gift basket. It had a great selection of stuff in it. And so we got to visit a lot of different tailgates. I mean, Virginia fans are great people. I'll say that. You're going to be treated well at Virginia. Jeff and I have been all over the ACC, and I'm sure we're a little bit biased, but the Virginia fans in general, when you come in as a guest, you're not going to be treated poorly like in some places.
Yeah, so Scott Stadium, I've checked it out. It looks like a beautiful place to see a game.
Yeah.
So yeah, just getting the idea of what it's like there in Charlottesville, it clues me in on what to expect there. So yeah, that's nice. So back to the Cavalier Connection podcast. Have you guys had the chance to collaborate with other college sports YouTubers? And if so, yeah, that was one of those wild games.
Yeah, I think the first game, I'll just put it out there. Like the first game, I'll give you two, but the first game was insane. Almost 57,000 people. Larry Coker running us out the tunnel. And I've never heard, I've been in the Alamo Dome for the Valero Bowl. I've never heard a game as loud as that one. And maybe because I was on the field or whatever, but it was insanely loud. That is something that only a handful of people are able to do, across their lifetime. And the fact that, us, being a part of the group of guys who was able to experience that and be on the field and be, cheered on by all those people, that'll never be light on my mind. I would also say another one that was significant was U of H. So we played U of H in 2014. It was a really big game for us at the time, and we were expecting big things from our team because that was my senior year, in 2014 or whatever. So we were expecting big things against that squad, but they were coming in and they had expectations and they were supposed to be good, and they scheduled us to open up the season in their brand new stadium. So they got a new stadium built. So we were supposed to be the team that they were going to come in and beat up on in their new stadium. And they packed that joker out. And we dominated that game. We won that game 27-7. And one of the big things about that is our cornerback room did an awesome job, and we all made big plays in that game, and we all had a significant impact on the outcome of that game. And it was just a blast, and that's one of the most memorable moments of my career.
That's great. So you mentioned the Alamo Dome, and it's been like a topic around UTSA lately. I've heard good things about the Alamo Dome, how it's a great place to play in and to just take in a game. What are the plans, from what you gather? What are the plans for the Alamo Dome going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be there, or UTSA will be there for a while. They're not going anywhere from the Dome. I think they, with the Project Marvel thing, as long as that goes off pretty well. So if you don't know what Project Marvel is, this is like big initiative in San Antonio where they're going to spend like a couple $2 billion on basically renovating the downtown area, putting a new stadium or arena for the Spurs, and then having basically the entire downtown area to become sort of like an sports entertainment spot where people can go and have fun. They're going to bring a lot of bars and a lot of activities for fans and things like that. And part of that would be some upgraded renovations to the Alamo Dome. And it wouldn't be necessarily strictly for UTSA, but UTSA would get the benefit of it because the Alamo Dome is the home turf. So I think that is what's on the horizon over the next, I would say, 5 or so years. I would say 2030-ish. So yeah, Alamo Dome's great, man. I don't think we're leaving.
Potential talk of Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee maybe possibly going to another conference, whether that be either MAC or anywhere else. Just a little bit more about that. When those rumors, and they're just rumors, when those rumors just got started about maybe they could go to the MAC, what were your thoughts initially about that?
Don't go. Do not leave Conference USA, to put it blunt. I think a lot of people were eager to make the jump out of Conference USA because, again, you had the mass exodus of a lot of the original Conference USA members moving on to the American Athletic. And so you thought to yourself, this is our opportunity to get out of this dying conference. Again, hindsight is 2020, and MTSU deciding to stay was the best financial decision the university ever made. Obviously, they made money from all those exit fees, but collectively, and excuse me if I'm going to be all over the place with this timeline, but you look back at basketball, you have UAB and North Texas who leave for the American Athletic Club. They both make the NIT championship game. They do not receive any of that money. Those that stayed in the conference got that money. You'll look at Liberty and their Fiesta Bowl, their entry. Again, the conference makes money from Liberty's representation in a New Year's Six Bowl. Those are just a few examples of the money that was then brought in because MTSU stayed. And because of that, I know the tax documents were released. They're always 2 years behind, but MTSU by far and away made, it was a ridiculous amount of money. I'm not going to put it out there what it was because I don't remember exactly, but I know it was by far and away more money than any other Conference USA team had made, and they only received those benefits because your newest entrants don't get those benefits, and those that left, obviously, they pay their exit fees, and they're not going to see a dime of that. So MTSU and Western Kentucky, for that matter, being 2 of the 4 that stayed, received a big surplus of all those financial gains from those postseason runs by those 2 sports, and so. All things considered, it looks great on paper now. And again, they're still circulating about them going to the MAC. And the MAC, I say a rumor, them going to the MAC was a legitimate conversation that was being had. Where the negotiations halted was the MAC wanted Western Kentucky and MTSU to make it. There was no if, and, or buts. We were a package deal. Western was ready to make the move to the MAC, and then MTSU was not ready to make the move. And I think MTSU, again, holding all the chips there, we're saying, Western needs us more than we need them. And again, maybe that's more the rivalry talking, but I think that's true because Western, I think, again, for geography reasons, if we both went to the MAC, we would be very out of, maybe not Bowling Green as much as Murfreesboro, but we would geographically be out of place for the MAC. And so if we were to go by ourselves, we would be putting a lot of a burden on travel, which all things considered, Conference USA is geographically makes no sense. You're as far west as Las Cruces and El Paso, and you're as far east and northeast as Delaware. So, and you're as far south as Miami. So the travel is already bad. But I think you need to have a geographic rivalry like you do with Western. So those two programs going together, I think we will always be that way. Western will never go anywhere without us, and vice versa. Again, just because of scheduling, the history of this rivalry, and the programs are, as far as institutions go, are again neck and neck as far as enrollment, the amount of money that these universities bring in. It just makes sense for these two to be together. So I've kind of gone off on this tangent to say, but MAC, the move to the MAC, I don't think made sense at that time, and certainly looking back on it, it doesn't make sense at all. And I would be very upset today if there was another negotiation brought forth that was introducing MTSU to the MAC. I don't think it makes any sense. And even back then, the MAC was trying to get MTSU to sign a 10-year deal. I just don't think, again, you could put yourself into that level of commitment with how much these conferences are already changing on an annual basis. I think locking yourself into a 10-year deal with the MAC, who doesn't really have, in my opinion, an upward trajectory as far as football goes, that I don't think it would be worth signing a 10-year contract.
How that came to be, of how you became a UCF fan for sports in general. What was that like?
Yeah, so I'm a military brat. We moved around everywhere, went to 3 different high schools in 4 years, right? My dad's side of the family is all from Ohio, actually, Cincinnati area. So I grew up an Ohio State fan for most of my life. And then we moved, my mom's German, so we had a bunch of friends that they knew in the military that moved to Orlando. A lot of people retired there. They had a naval base there. So we moved to Orlando, and that's where I did my senior year. So at the time, I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, and I had a few choices. I was thinking about pursuing something in international relations, and then my first passion was always space and engineering. So I decided on an aerospace engineering track, and for my undergrad. And UCF produced the most engineers for NASA and for the defense industry as a whole in the entire country. It was a university founded in '63 to support the space program, which is why we have such a big space theme, right? That's literally why we were founded. We have a space grant. So when I looked around, I'd applied to a few different schools. I got into UF and Ohio State, and which also has a great engineering program. But as far as placement and getting people where they needed to be, that was the best place for me to be. So I started at UCF in '99 out of high school. And I started kind of getting into it in '98 when we moved there. And that was the tail end of the Dante Culpepper years. I don't know if you're familiar with Dante, but he was a budding star out of UCF, Mike Sims Walker, just a bunch of guys that you would know. And so they were doing really, really well. We went from, I think we were still in the MAC at that point. We were independent, and then we went into the MAC, and started getting into it then because I knew I was going to be at the school. And then while I was at school, obviously I got even more into it, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And my ex-spouse, I met her going to school there, so she was a graduate as well. The kids grew up as UCF fans, going to football games, basketball games, and everything else. So it was Orlando's hometown team. It grew quite a bit even since I was there for my undergrad. In '99, we had 32,000 students. Now it's 69,000 students, and we're playing in a Power 4 league. So, it's that growth and that trajectory. It was always frustrating but fun to be part of as a UCF fan, because we moved conferences every 8 years. 7 to 8 years moved up in conferences. So it was frustrating because you're going to a new conference and then you got to learn how to compete. And then we constantly had this chip on our shoulder where everybody in the state of Florida or in college football, everybody heard about 2017. And even in 2013, when we beat Baylor for the first time in our Tostitos in the Fiesta Bowl, there was always this chip on our shoulder how UCF was never going to win. They never had a chance, kind of looked down upon. And so it was frustrating because you were constantly fighting for relevance. And then at the same time, when you had these milestone markers, you got to celebrate those. And there's very few fan bases. I mean, Ohio's been around a really, really long time. You know, the football program has been around a really long time. We didn't start playing football till 79, and that was in Division III. So we went Division III, Division II, Division 1A, Division I, and now into a Power 4 independent, and then to a Power 4 conference. There's very few fan bases that get to see that rise within one lifetime, right? And so for us, it was frustrating but fun to watch that, and it kind of got you closer to the team because it was like an us versus them mentality. And then now you've got kids going, because I'm 44 now, right? And so now you've got a second generation that's now going to UCF, and they've grown up as UCF fans instead of a UF fan, but we're going to UCF, and I still cheer for UCF, but UF is my primary football team because they're a power team and they're relevant. That's transition now. And so it's been fun to be part of that ride. It makes you closer to the team. You go through the ups and downs with them. You know, that's why UCF fans are so vocal on Twitter, because there's that constant chip on your shoulder. They have the Twitter mafia. But it's great from an engagement perspective, togetherness, and it's really a different experience than you would get at a lot of the other schools. And I've been to a lot of other schools for games.
Yeah. So you mentioned about switching conferences ever so often, and doing research on UCF, their recent history, it came to my mind right away that they were in the MAC.
Not in terms of any sort of rivalry, but it has been a long time since Ohio and Ohio State got together on the football field. And I believe the last time it happened, the Bobcat tried to kill the Buckeye. So it is very significant in that way. I'm sure Brutus remembers what happened the last time these two teams met.
You know what? I was about to mention that to you, Nate, just randomly. And no, it's silly to think about it now. You know, Rufus the Bobcat going after Brutus the Buckeye. You know, you look back at it now, it's that's silly. But it's like,
but it wasn't to me. Have you ever talked or listened to an interview of the guy that was in the Bobcat? That was war to him. It really was. He hated that mascot. And beyond the mascot, looking at the guy inside the big old sweaty suit, that dude hated Ohio State. And he again, that was not a show put on for the crowd, and it wasn't planned. It really was Brutus getting sucker punched and getting sideswiped and honestly getting mauled and beaten to the ground. Now, Brutus held his own very, very well. But I mean, just probably one of the more wild, forgotten about things that we've seen in the history of college football. So it's significant in that way. On the football field, I think Ohio's got a lot of good challenging pieces, but Ohio State's way too talented. No one's going to be able to cover Jeremiah Smith. Good luck stopping Caleb Downs. And even though the defensive line is all new, there's bigger bodies, more physicality. Ohio State's going to win the game by, I'll probably say 25 plus points to be on the safe side. I know I said 40-50 earlier. I think the Bobcats are a respectable team. And there have been some moments where Ohio State has at points struggled with teams out of the MAC, even though they historically dominate them. But it is a significant game in that way because of what happened the last time that they met on the football field.
Yeah. Putting that aside, between Rufus the Bobcat and Brutus Buckeye makes me laugh even to think about it.
It does to me too.
Yeah, the evaluation of the game, it's pretty spot on. I don't have any expectations about that game in particular.
I think as long as you're competitive and keep that thing close for maybe a quarter, I think that's a massive win, especially in a new head coaching era. Now, I need to answer the second part of your question. Which can you re-ask that question?
If
you remember.
I remember. The second part of the question was, should there be more games like this, whether it's Ohio State facing Ohio or any other caliber team like that?
So I'm going to answer this two different ways. You need to keep some of these rivalries alive. Like, I hate that Bedlam is going away. I hate that we probably are not going to see what used to be called the Civil War for a long time. Who knows what's going to happen with the Apple Cup? Right now, we're obviously going to get USC, UCLA. Now we have a conference where BYU and Houston are together, which I love because I love watching the Holy War. It's one of my favorite rivalry games. We're always going to get Bama, Tennessee, Bama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida. We're going to get those things, but some of the other ones are going away, especially with all this conference realignment stuff. And even though I'm one of the people that welcome and accept conference realignment, it keeps things fresh. It definitely is a pretty devastating blow to a lot of these rivalries out there. So that's one way that I can answer the question. And seeing more games like this, even though Ohio State is not really a big time rivalry, I think it's still cool to see. And even when Ohio State plays Toledo or Bowling Green or Akron, it's still an in-state team. And obviously Ohio State is helping fund their athletic program, which you need in the sport. Speaking of that.
So it was super fun to be a reporter in those atmospheres and getting to represent OU and Athens in that way. And that really is why I took so much pride in telling the stories as thoroughly as I could, as accurately as I could, because I wanted to represent the OU and Athens community with the utmost pride. So,
yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the Battle of the Bricks rivalry between Ohio and Miami of Ohio, because I'm going to start mentioning that a little bit here. So you were there last year in Athens, Ohio, for 2024, the run that the Ohio Bobcats went on for football. What was that like? What was that entire run like from start to finish? Because I was there too from a distance. I mean, not in Athens, but I was there, covering the Bobcats. What was it like being there, just watching everything progress that the way that it did, with ultimately being a MAC championship for the Bobcats?
Yeah, it was super cool because I think it was just so unexpected. It felt like the team, it took a little bit of time for them to, at the beginning of the season, to kind of get things going. They looked clunky at times. And then, I think it was actually, they were at Miami last year and they got blown out. I think after that game is really when I noticed just a tick in the team. It kind of just seemed that loss, it pulled the team together, and they just started winning games, and they went on this crazy run. It was really awesome that I had the opportunity in my 4 years there to watch both Curtis Rourke and Parker Navarro just ascend as quarterbacks. Sam Wigluss, the wide receiver, got to interview him in a podcast we did there at WOUB. But yeah, going into that 2024 season, the expectations weren't that high for the football team. And I think once they started reeling off games, people started, we started talking about it, especially in the journalism building, in the sports department. And we were saying, this team might be able to go on a run. They might be able to make something happen here. So it was really cool, just the fact that the expectations were low to start the year. And then as the year continued, this momentum kept building. And ultimately we had people bussing up and driving up to Detroit to witness history. And what better team to witness history, get the win against than Miami of Ohio, the team that I think kind of ignited that run for the Bobcats that year. So definitely a special season. As I said, I was kind of telling you before we started the interview here, as I was working on my project, the 1968 football team, I kind of had this idea in mind is, okay, football is probably not going to win the MAC championship this year. So that 1968 team will still be the last time OU won a MAC championship. And the Bobcats last year just kept winning and winning. And, I got to witness, the first OU MAC championship since 1968 as I was working on, the 1968 team. So that was a really cool kind of come full circle moment for me. And definitely you could tell campus was buzzing when they won that MAC championship.
Yeah. For me, it was special for many reasons, because I was just getting started covering the Bobcats myself on my YouTube channel, and just to see how they did, it was just amazing. The whole run last year was amazing. And it just started to, like, you see it back there, that banner behind me.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really neat.
I mean, I found that at a thrift store one day. I was like, yeah, I got to get it. And just what it means to be an Ohio Bobcat, to follow this, to follow this program. It's just it means a lot. So
Stephen, this is something that puzzles me. I don't understand. We paid $75 for White Sox tickets, 20 rows behind home plate, which
okay.
was actually not a bad price. But then parking was $30. I paid $14 for a 16-ounce beer. We ended up spending over $300 to go to that game.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So I, for the life of me, can't understand why, say, St. Louis, we've got the Grizzlies on the east side, who have gotten a little press now because they've been playing so well. You've got the Hoots in O'Fallon. You've got the Alton River Dragons on the Illinois side, and also in the Prospect League. You can go to any one of those games for, I think the Hoots just announced they're selling their tickets for $9 for the rest of the season. You take a family of four, that's $36. You can't even get into a Cardinal game for $36.
Yeah.
But people would rather, go to one or two Cardinal games a year, or Reds or Cubs or wherever you are, than go to, the other game, the minor league game or independent league game in town. You could probably go to one of those every other weekend for less money than you would going to one or two major league games.
Yeah. There is a big difference economically between going to a major league game and going to lower level minor league games, even summer collegiate games. And I wanted to ask that about fan experience, because I watch all sorts of YouTube videos about, commentaries on baseball. What do people think about where Major League Baseball in particular is going? I read comments in the comment section below and videos, and I get a whole lot of different opinions. Some of it, very positive, and some of it not so much. And I just also want to ask you, what are your thoughts on Major League Baseball, where it's headed, and what are your thoughts also on the rule changes that they've put into place just this past year?
It's funny. And as far as rule changes, I was not a fan of those when they were announced. But if you think historically, rule changes have always been a part of baseball, and baseball doesn't change their rules nearly as much as, say, the NFL does.
Yeah.
It seems like every year there are a dozen rule changes in the NFL. I think the thing with this pass off season is we saw several at one time, which we don't usually see. I mean, the biggest rule change we had seen before was, I guess, the adoption of the designated hitter in 19.
Hey guys, if you made it this far in this video, thank you so much for watching this entire compilation of interviews that I've done in 2025. It wasn't easy doing this, so I'm very appreciative and thankful for you guys for helping me out to do this. Everyone I've interviewed, thank you all. This is my way of saying thank you all for allowing me to do this for 2025. And yes, I will be back in 2026, early 2026, to do this again. And basically, to wrap this all up, and I don't want to be long-winded with this, but basically the point of Stephen Interviews You was just to sit down, have a good chat, as I always say in the intro, and to just sit back and listen to what the other person has to say. Even though the title of this series will say Stephen Interviews You, I never wanted this to be about Stephen. I wanted this to be about you, the other person I'm interviewing. This is where you guys can just, take your time to basically take center stage and tell your story. the way that you want to, and discussing topics that matter to you. That's basically it as well. So I'm making this little short clip on Thanksgiving morning, Thursday, Thanksgiving morning. What better way to do this? So I want to take out this time to say thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. We'll be back next year, 2026, to do this. Please like this video. Please like this special episode of Steven Interviews You. Please click the like button, the thumbs up. Share this video with other people, with other college sports fans, and just those that enjoy listening to interviews in general. Please share it with them, and get the word out. Spread the word about Steven Interviews You, and I'm always looking forward to more interviews going forward in the future. So, again, thank you guys for allowing this to become a thing. I really do thank you guys for this. So yeah, this is Stephen Vitt signing out. Hope you guys are having a good day. Until we meet again, take care.